Today, James is talking to us about how we use our words. He's talking to us about this thing we do all the time, and yet he wants us to back up, take a couple steps back, and take a look at it. Now, he begins by kind of putting our mind at ease because when we start talking about the use of our language, we've all messed up, right? In fact, he starts that way. He says, we all stumble in many ways. Thank you, James. Every one of us have had words that wounded us deeply, and we have also wounded people deeply with our words. And so if we come in here today and just embrace guilt and shame, we won't really catch what he's trying to say. So he just acknowledges that right up front. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect. Now, when we hear that word perfect, we just kind of recoil, like, we don't even know how to spell perfect, let alone be perfect. But this word is very, very interesting in the New Testament. In the original language of the New Testament, Koine Greek, the word there is teleos. And teleos has a few different meanings. One of the meanings of teleos is that something is completed, something is finished, it is accomplished. When we read of the death of Jesus Christ, his last words were, "It is finished," and the word teleos is used there. It is completed. I have done what I came to do. So that's one meaning of it. Another word, sometimes we translate teleos, is not perfect, but perfected. In other words, something is completed. If you're an engineer, and I'm sure there are a few in this room, let's say you're an engineer and you're working on a robotic arm. And this robotic arm is going to take this piece and put it here, and it's going to take this piece and put it there, and you almost got this sucker working, and you keep trying, and it keeps dropping the piece, and it keeps messing up and everything, and then finally, you watch it, it puts that piece there, and puts that piece there, and you go, I perfected it. Now, you're not saying it's flawless. It's going to need oiled, it's going to need maintained, it's going to need to have parts replaced. But you're saying it is now accomplishing what it was intended to accomplish. So sometimes in the scripture, when it says to be perfect, there's one phrase where it says, be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. That always blows us away. Perhaps what it's saying is, fulfill your calling in this life. Do what God created you to do. And a third meaning for this word, teleos, is simply the word maturity, to be mature. And that always indicates a process, doesn't it? We never look at our 7-year-old kid and say, finally, he's mature. No, he's maturing. And really we never look at ourselves that way either. We never say, woke up this morning and realized I'm mature. No. We usually wake up and realize we're learning something. We're growing. We're changing. And that's the way the translation we use today, that's the way it's translated, that if anyone never makes mistakes in what they say, then they are fully mature. But James has just said, but we all make mistakes, so we're all maturing on this. So it's just level playing ground here, all right? Some of us have made a lot of mistakes with our language, and James is going to help us with that and not condemn us for it. Now, the way he helps us is to kind of communicate two basic things that we know, but we need to be reminded of. One is that our words are powerful. And the second is that the stakes are high. We know that, right? Our words are powerful, but the stakes are high. And we just need to be reminded. So in this passage, James kind of takes me by the collar and says, okay, Phil, I want to remind you of a couple things. The first thing is how powerful your words are. He uses 3 images to do that. The first image is the bit we use to guide a horse. I'm not a horseman. Last time I was on a horse, I got thrown off. Well, it wasn't the last time, but I guess I did get back on the horse. Hey, how about that? But those of you who know horses, they're big and strong and powerful animals. And James says if it's done right, you can take a little piece of metal and you can put that in the horse's mouth and you can determine the direction that horse goes. Little thing, big results. It says our tongue is a small part of our body, but it guides everything we do. The second image is the image of a ship. He says a ship is carried on by the sails, and he says it takes a massive amount of power to move that ship. And he said, back in the back of that ship, there's a guy called the pilot, and he's got his hand on the rudder. Have you ever taken one of those tours of a ship? I remember taking a tour of one of the Great Lakes freighters, and you go in there and you want to see the wheelhouse, you want to see the power of it, you want to see the cargo space. No one ever says, can I see the rudder? Nobody thinks about the rudder. And James is saying, it may be the most important thing. I mean, that hull and those sails and that whole ship is just going to be a shipwreck without the rudder. And he says, and so that tongue, a small part of us, is a powerful, powerful thing. The third metaphor he uses is the metaphor of a spark and a forest fire. Man, in recent years, we have gotten so much news about these huge fires. They're consuming, thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. I remember before COVID hit, it was Australia that had those. You remember that? And they said that even the insides of houses and hospitals were smoky because of how huge those fires were and the winds that carried it. A couple of years ago, it was Canada, and we were experiencing some of the fallout of those terrible fires. I had friends up in Canada who, had to leave their home and go stay with a relative because of those. And then perennially, it seems like out in California. And every time we hear about one of those huge fires, we all think the same thing. How did that start? And sometimes it's big stuff. Sometimes it's a lightning strike or something like that and turns into this huge calamity. And then sometimes you'll hear something like somebody forgot to put their campfire out or a power line went down. A small spark can be so incredibly destructive. Whenever I read this, I always remember one time when I heard a person say that you and I walk through life and we all carry 2 buckets with us. We all carry 2 buckets. We have a bucket of water, we have a bucket of gasoline. And we come into this world and we go through our world and we encounter these things. Sometimes maybe it's conflict. Sometimes maybe it's conflict of words. And we get to choose which one we're going to use. We can take that bucket of water and say, let's be more constructive in the way we approach this problem. Let's honor each other. Let's be kind to each other. We can take that bucket of water and do that, or we can take that bucket of gasoline when we're really ticked off. Small spark does great things. Now, at this point in James's little soliloquy, he's not just describing how powerful our words are. He now goes to how destructive they can be. Not our favorite part of this passage, but he wants us to hear this. So he's talking about this spark. He says, a small flame can set a whole forest on fire. The tongue is a small flame of fire, a whirl of evil at work in us. It contaminates our entire lives. Because of it, the circle of life is set on fire. And then he reaches for a very extreme metaphor that he wants them to hear. He says, the tongue itself is set on fire by the flames of hell. Wow. Now, when he wrote that word that some have translated hell, he wrote the word Gehenna in the original language. And all of his readers and all of his listeners knew what Gehenna was. Gehenna was a place they were all familiar with. They'd all seen. It sometimes in the Hebrew was Gehinnom because it was in the Hinnom Valley. And, the Hinnom Valley. Got my M's and N's turned around. In the Hinnom Valley. And what Gehenna was literally a huge dump, a huge trash heap, a huge fire pit in the Hinnom Valley adjacent to the Kidron Valley. And it had this aura around it, this reputation. For one thing, the stench was unbelievable. Carcasses of dead animals would be thrown there and all kinds of refuse. Some scholars believe that in James's day, they had the memory of centuries before even human sacrifice had taken there. So it was an evil place. And the smell and the flame and all the refuse in there, it was just vile. And James takes this image of this dump on the southwest side of Jerusalem that all these people were aware of. And he's saying something to us very seriously. He's saying sometimes our speech can get vile. And we've all seen it. We've all heard it. Maybe we've all been in those situations where you're with a group of people and the conversation turns and it's not just gossip, it's hateful gossip. and you hear someone demeaning someone who's not there. He's not even a human. He's a piece of, I hate that guy. And others chime in, and it's not just a matter of disagreeing with the person, it's this matter of vilifying this person, and it's vile speech. And at some point you go, I gotta go, I'm out of here. And you go home, and on your way home, you think, I just want to take a shower. It was so dirty and so ugly. And that's what James is trying to tell us, that speech can actually go to that level. He's warning us. Now, what James also does is he gives us a solution, at least a first step in that solution. Because you and I, we just have a hard time watching our mouths. I do, okay? If no one else needs to hear this sermon, dude does, okay? But we don't ever want to get to the point where our speech is vile or anything like that. We want to mature in this. We want to grow. So here's what James suggests, and this first point is so important for us. He says, no one can tame the tongue. He says, with it we bless the Lord and Father, and we curse human beings made in God's likeness. There's that key. We bless the Lord, and we curse people who are made in his image. And the beginning point of our speech, the very beginning point, is the acknowledgement that everyone is made in the image of God, that everyone is made in the likeness of God. Almost everyone? No, everyone. And there's something that happens when we recognize that. And he goes on and kind of describes what's going to happen to us when we recognize that. He says, both fresh water and salt water don't come from the same spring, do they? Can a fig tree produce olives? Can a grapevine produce figs? Of course not. And fresh water doesn't flow from the same spring as salt water. He's trying to help you and I become more integrated people. In other words, he says when we begin to see that our words impact not only our relationship with God, but our relationship to people who are made in the image of God, it begins to integrate our lives. We begin to see the whole instead of just the parts. And an integrated life brings integrity to our speech. That's what it means to be a person of integrity. It means our lives are integrated. We're one person. We're not this way to God and this way to people. In fact, last week, as Pastor Josh was reading the scripture, you might have remembered a word in that from the book of James that said, don't be double-minded. That's an interesting phrase in the book of James because the word for mind is actually also the word for soul. He's saying, don't be two-souled. Don't have two souls. Don't be this way and praise God with one soul and then condemn others with your other soul. He says that not only is destructive to them, it destroys you. Duplicity destroys us. Integration matures us, and integration brings integrity to our speech and to our lives. He's trying to help us on this journey. None of us are fully integrated. Okay, all of us have inconsistencies. May I dare say all of us have little hypocrisies. You know, sometimes we get so mad at someone and we keep learning that the people who make us the most angry are the people who are the most like us. And it's hard to see that. So none of us are perfect. We're all maturing. We have inconsistencies. We have small hypocrisies. But as we try desperately to see the face of Christ in all people, we begin to become more integrated, and integrity begins to come to our speech and to our lives. And we're not double-minded. We're one person. And Jesus reiterated that. This is not what you put in your mouth that makes you unclean. It's what comes out of your mouth that can really, really, really be unclean. And that's not God's desire for us. Now, wisdom is always practical. Wisdom is not ethereal. Wisdom is practical. And James makes this utterly, entirely practical. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's practical. And he does that through a few words that go clear back to the first chapter of James. If you've been reading this, you will recognize in the very first chapter, the 19th verse, he says this, "Know this, my dear sisters and brothers, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to grow angry." Quick to listen, Now, that isn't just to hear. That verb designates to understand. Be quick to listen. I mean, not just hear, but to listen to understand. Be quick to understand, slow to speak, and slow to embrace anger. I think that's the sequence. Problem is, we tend to get it backwards sometimes, don't we? We're quick to get angry, quick to speak, and slow to listen. Especially, oh my, in our day, communication is so instantaneous. It's so instantaneous that people are constantly, all of us, we're speaking before we listen. I always, it always kind of fascinates me that, something will happen, worldwide. Something will happen in the Olympics. Something will happen, in Washington. Something will happen. Some congressman said something, or some pundit said something stupid, or maybe you don't think it's stupid, but I guess I judged there before I listened, didn't I? And what happens is people are responding within moments. They don't even know what actually went on. They don't know the consequences. They're responding within moments. They're very quick to speak. First, they're very quick to become angry. They hear that, they go, I can't believe that. Why? Let me get on the keyboard and go after it, At least that's what I'm always tempted to do. I read something, I go, have they got two cells working? What are they thinking? And I want to go and get going at it. But then I realize there's not one person on earth who's saying, I need to know Phil Stout's opinion on it, and I need it now. Nobody's saying that about me or about you. I'm saying I got to voice my opinion. I got to get it out. I got to do it. And we're all, some of you are much more mature on this than me, so I shouldn't say we all, but many of us are like that. But James just saying, okay, and James didn't even know the instantaneity of communication like we did. When he was talking to people, they might be talking to their family or just a small group of people, and we have the potential to talk to hundreds or thousands of people. The sequence is, be quick to listen. I want to understand. Help me understand, Lord. Then slow to speak. Are my words even necessary on this? And if they are, they ought to be words that feel like I'm speaking up in obedience to the Lord. And then that might just take care of my anger, or it might make my anger really be the right kind of anger, a righteous anger, and not just a self-anger. So very practical, quick to listen, quick to understand, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It just makes sense, right? It just sounds like some aphorism you'd read, in the almanac or something like that, I'm sorry, younger ones, ask the older generations what that is. But it's straight from Scripture. Second thing, of course, is this, that implicit in all that James is saying and explicit in what Jesus said about our speech, if my speech has the power to do great evil, it also has the power to do great good. I mean, we know that, but we ought to be reminded of it. If each one of us has the power with our speech to tear people down, we also have the power to build people up. If we with our speech all have the power to just promote cynicism and despair, we also have the power to promote hope and a vision and love. And so every day we just get to choose that stuff. We just get to choose it. God has given each one of us the ability to encourage, every one of us. And sometimes that ability is just life-changing. I want to tell you a little story that happened to me just a couple weeks ago, and I'm not saying this to puff myself up because what I said, I stole from someone else, all right? It wasn't original with me. But years ago, I heard a person say, live like you have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. You've probably heard me say that. I say it all the time. I say that to myself every day. A couple weeks ago, I got a text message, and this person said, hey, I want to tell you something. Gave me the name of a friend. Said, you talked to my friend years ago. I don't remember the conversation exactly, but I'm thinking we may even be talking decades ago. And this person was going through a hard time, and she came through it pretty strongly, and And she's influenced me, and she's influenced so many of our friends. She's built us up so much. And you had written something down for her, and it was on a refrigerator. It sounded like you were talking on a refrigerator for years and years and years. And she sent me a picture of it. And there in my handwriting was, live like you have nothing to hide, nothing to prove, nothing to lose. I didn't make that up. I stole that from someone. I think it was a comedian, actually. Our best prophets today are comedians, you know. And that was a life-changing phrase to me. And I just said it to someone, and they stuck it on their fridge, and it was a life-changing phrase to her, and then also to many of her friends. You see how powerful our words are when we don't even know it. And God takes those words and in amazing ways makes change in people's lives. Our words are powerful, and our words can do amazing things. I remember when I was a freshman in college, and probably every freshman in college does this, but I hit a point in there where I thought, this is stupid. I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't think I'm going to make it through the first year. I need to just try something else. And that day that I kind of hit that really low spot, I went to my student mailbox and opened up a card from my older sister that said, Phil, I believe in you. I was 19 years old. I remember that to this day. See, I can use my words and you can use your words to say things that are hurtful and harmful that will be remembered for decades. We can also say things that are encouraging that will be remembered for decades. Now, don't get me wrong. James is not saying we don't say the hard things. We speak the truth in love. We speak truth to power. We have to confront lies with truth. And especially those of you who have gone through times of being verbally abused, you know that God's not calling you. I hope you know that God's not calling you to just say, that's okay, I take that. No, we're not saying that we don't answer evil, but we're saying we don't answer evil with an intent to destroy. We answer evil with an intent for restoration to come. We don't answer evil with weapons of injustice. You know, when you act like your enemy, you become like your enemy. But we use other words. Here's what the book of Proverbs says. Book of Proverbs 12:8, it says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. I think if I could just remember that every day, I would become a more integrated person. Maybe if I remember that every day, some of my inconsistencies I could deal with and some of my hypocrisies I could deal with. Maybe that's how that works. I think it is. I think that's what James is telling us. We're going to go to our time of confession. Allie's going to come forward and lead us in that. And as she does, I just want to leave you with this quote. I just ran across this a couple weeks ago, put it on my social media. It's on encouragement. I want to encourage us with the word of encouragement, okay? That's from the Department of Redundancy Department, if you were wondering. It's short, but it's powerful. Encouragement is a warm breeze imparting hope to others. It plants the seed of courage in their lives. It is an action filled with the power of regeneration, or as we would say in our Christian tradition, it is an action filled with the power of resurrection.